This is the character analysis of Katya from the Puffed Rice and Meatballs. Katya, the narrator, is a young woman of Soviet Russian descent who is struggling in adulthood with past trauma from her childhood. When asked about her childhood, Katya tells a story to appease her lover who asks to hear about her experience with communism as a form of entertainment. She is hesitant at first, trying to gauge his intentions for why he is asking such a deep question, but soon relaxes when she realizes the question is merely for entertainment. She dives into a deep story of her first ever sexual encounter when she was just in preschool with the game of "I'll show you mine if you show me yours." Katya hurries through the story to appease her lover while also leaving details out that could ruin the lightheartedness and expose her vulnerability. Later on, she feels shameful knowing that she took a traumatic story from her childhood and twisted it into somewhat of a comedic story. She longs for a man who she can tell her true stories to, the stories that are hard to tell, but it seems as though she's holding herself back from experiencing that. Later on, she tells a different story, her true story, to herself. She highlights moments of excitement, of puberty, and getting breasts, which quickly goes awry when her body is used as a battering ram against an unruly crowd. So a question worth noting is, how does past trauma affect relationships in the future? We first experience a single trauma, or maybe a series of traumas that add up over time. A wall is put up, and this barrier acts as a defense mechanism to prevent others from getting close enough to see your emotional scars. Next, bad communication occurs in relationships when one embellishes stories or feels the need that they have to embellish these stories to keep their guard up while also pleasing the other. The trauma and defense mechanisms won't allow someone fully in, which then causes loneliness and the feeling of isolation even when surrounded by other people. The sense of loneliness can further result in depression. Katya has a sense of loneliness and depression, reliving traumatic experiences and isolation throughout the entire story. In order for Katya to move on, she needs to develop a few practices or have access to those resources that will help her to not hold herself back based on past memories and instead process and work through her memories to move forward and create real relationships. Getting professional help would allow Katya to tell her true stories without having to hold any details back because she would be speaking with a professional in a safe place who would be non-judgmental. She could also find her own coping mechanisms. Examples of this could be writing in a journal or drawing. It would allow her to get her story out, process it, and release it. Something that would greatly benefit Katya is having a good support system. When having feelings of depression or loneliness, having people around you who lift you up, support you, and listen without judgment is very important. In the story, the only person mentioned in Katya's adult life is a lover whose name is not even mentioned and who she does not feel comfortable being 100% real with. So having people around who she does feel comfortable with would have a more positive impact on her mental health and her relationships with others. A huge practice to incorporate into everyday life is learning how to forgive and forget. This involves forgiving others while also forgiving yourself as well, and then forgetting so that you don't hold yourself back in life. If Katya had worked through her traumatic experiences in a healthy way, she would be able to identify her fears when it comes to letting others in. She'd be able to determine exactly why she's holding herself back from establishing those connections. If she can recognize these things, her mental health and relationships would be positively impacted. Readers would see a different and happier version of Katya. Local resources in Memphis include the counseling services offered at the University of Memphis. They offer individual therapy, group therapy, couples, family, and partner therapy, comprehensive diagnostic assessments, and psychiatry services, and crisis services as well. On the iHeart Memphis blog, the community can add get-togethers to their calendars to meet new people. With going to any of the local gatherings, you're able to create relationships with many different people who have the same interests as you. From that, you have the potential to create lifelong friendships or partnerships while building trust along the way. Your church is a great way to form a group of supportive people as well. Churches offer many services like group therapies, group discussions, lectures, Bible study groups, sports, family meals, and more. From learning about Katya, who faces trauma and hasn't let the weight of those experiences release from her shoulders yet, and then learning different practices and resources that could help her in adulthood, people are able to first off recognize that they are not alone. Learning that you're not alone in your head is the first step in being able to confide in others and find that support system. When you find the best practices or resources that work for you, you're then able to help others who might be experiencing the same thing or something similar. Finding these outlets aids people in finding their own success and push back the barriers you've put on yourself. Being able to release your trauma in healthy ways helps with the feeling of isolation and depression.